This is week number 2. Did God create the universe or become it? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Brahmachari Yogananda. The Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, contains a passage that explains the essential truth that creation is a process of becoming. The universe is not separate from God the Creator, but a part of Him, even as our own dream creations during sleep are figments of our consciousness. God's is the life, God's the reality. Not a melody could be composed, not a poem written, were the melody and the poem not already there, simply waiting to be expressed. And this is a quote from the Bible. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in the darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Ego-directed desire is like static. It distorts the radioed messages of infinity. But the pristine impulse from the divine, undistorted by limitation and delusion, is the life that gives rise to all that is. As the 7th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita states, I am the fluidity of water, I am the silver light of the moon and the golden light of the sun. I am the Om chanted in all the Vedas, the cosmic sound moving as if soundlessly through the ether. I am the manliness of men. I am the good sweet smell of the moist earth. I am the luminescence of fire, the sustaining life of all living creatures. I am self-offering in those who would expand their little lives into cosmic life. O Arjuna, know me as the eternal seed of all creatures. In the perceptive, I am their perception. In the great, I am their greatness. In the glorious, it is I who am their glory. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Well, let's begin this little discussion. Let's pick this up on the Western side, which is, in Him was life, and the life was the light of all men. Basically, God here is, this is actually a hard thing to talk about, because Swamiji put this together, and he's basically saying one thing: God is everything. And so, where do you pick that up from? Really the place to pick that up from, it's a realization that you can say on and on that God is everything, but it doesn't matter. But you hear the way that the saints say that they dance with joy. That everything is God. And we kind of scratch our head and say, but this bad thing happened, and how would God do bad things? But we haven't understood. We haven't understood, and I'll take it from this side here, that getting to know God is an act of becoming. And so let's take it from God's perspective, that He didn't make the universe like a sculptor would carve a sculpture out of a tree or out of a stone. That God simply became the universe. And you could think of it like this, that if you have an ocean that is God, that He manifests Himself as waves from time to time. But in time, that wave will sink back into the ocean. And this is all really just wordplay here, but I'm using that word manifests as a wave. That means that God didn't create the wave, that because the ocean was already there, so the substance that He didn't create it because it was already there. The substance that it's made out of, He simply manifests it for a while, and then He drops it back. And so that's the same with us, that God has manifested us, that He's manifesting Himself through us. So that's from God's perspective. But now this is fun to take it from our perspective as a finite ego that's trying to reach back into God realization, and to think that we too, our spiritual process is a process of becoming. And we too, that God didn't make the universe, He became it. We too, as we try to figure out who we are, and as we expand our identity bigger and bigger, in time we will become the entire universe. And we will become more than that, we will become one with God. But isn't that an interesting way to look at it from either perspective? But So we're going to literally become the universe. And how are we going to do that? Are we going to do that planet by planet by thinking, okay, now I'm this solar system, and this solar system, and no, not at all. We're going to do that by becoming silent, by going back into ourselves, by taking all of those waves of desire and stilling them. You see that we're constantly going out loving God's gifts, that God says, in one way, he had no right to do it, but he did. That he put us in this mess, and that he said, oh, well, try this desire. And we think, oh, okay, that seems nice. And then, no, that didn't quite do it. Well, try this desire. No, that didn't quite do it. And after many incarnations, we begin to understand that it's not the gifts that we want, that it's him that we want. And I want to tell a story about this. It's one of my favorites. It's a story that Swamiji used to tell. And you can imagine that there was a man in America, I believe it was in World War II, and he was sent to boot camp, the place you go for training before you actually go to war. And all of the people there, they saw this one man, and he was behaving quite strangely, that he would just go about all day picking up pieces of paper off the ground, and he would look at it and say, nope, that's not it. And he'd put it back down, and he'd go to the trash can where he could find many pieces of paper. And, no, that's not it. No, that's not it. No, that's not it. I don't know what the bosses are called in the army, but let's just say sergeants. His sergeants were just having a terrible time trying to get this man, to carry around his gun and run around and jump through all the hoops and everything. And after a while, watching this odd behavior after days, that they just decided to send this man to the camp psychiatrist because he didn't seem to be fit for war. And so this man goes into the psychiatrist's office, and first thing he does, he sees some paper on his desk, and he looks, no, that's not it. And he goes in the waste can, the dustbin, and takes out a piece of, no, that's not it. And so the psychiatrist, he certainly sees this man going around. This man is certainly not fit to be in the army. He's a nutcase. And so the psychiatrist gets a piece of paper and starts writing on it, and then he says to the man that this is for you. And it turned out to be the man's discharge papers saying that you are no longer fit to serve in the army, that you are discharged now from the army. And the man takes the piece of paper, reads it. This is it! And it's such a funny story because it relates exactly to what we've been doing for so many incarnations. And God, he does have so much to give us outwardly, and we do try all of these different things, but just like that ocean we were talking about earlier, that the waves, they always go up and down. So if you get fame, one day you'll have shame. If you get praise, you'll get blame. And what we're trying to do, those are going to come. There's nothing we can even do about it. But what we're trying to do is just be neutral to it. I don't know if you ever had this experience when you were a child, but if you're on a swing set, that there's a particular motion that you can make with your legs and with your body, and you can go with the swing, and you can go higher and higher, or there's a motion you can make and you can go against it. But you see here, this whole passage, it's just about God already is everything. So what do you do about that? But what you do about that is you cooperate. Just like that child going with the swing, that we cooperate, and we cooperate with God's grace. That it's the only way out of this conundrum, out of Maya, that we can't think our way out of the trap, that we can't bargain our way out, and say, oh God, I'll really be a good boy or a good girl if you just let me out of delusion. That God, there's nothing you can say to him. But there's one thing that he doesn't have, and that's our love. And the more we give him our love, the more he does reveal himself to us. I've been meditating a lot lately, and on this one devotee named Horace. He was a devotee of Paramahansa Yogananda. He was spastic, meaning he just whatever he would do, he would shake, and he had a stutter, saying I. He couldn't express himself clearly with words, and yet Master said that he would find God. in this incarnation. And when the rest of the monks heard this, they were taken aback. Because this man was absolutely a non-entity in the organization. Just absolutely didn't seem to contribute anything. But he had love. And so the monks said to the master, "It must be a simple kind of devotion that pleases God, isn't it?" And the master just said, "Yes, that it's that simple kind of devotion." So don't think that if you're a part of a spiritual organization, that in order to impress God, that you have to be the superstar of the organization. Not at all. That the highest way you can serve the organization, that the highest way that you can serve your guru or your master is with your consciousness. That's the highest service that you can give to mankind, is to raise your own level of consciousness. And that's all that the master wants from you anyways. And while we're talking about the master and the relationship that you might have with him, that you might think that he's there to just smooth out your life, just to make everything perfect, but he's not. He's there to demolish your ego. And that can be quite a painful experience. And let's face it, even if you don't have a guru, life itself is a painful experience. And that's why people turn away from God. That's why people lose their faith and think that God can't exist, and they get a trial that's just tremendous. Don't shirk away from these trials. Face them bravely, but more than even that, face them calmly from your own center, knowing that it's God who gave you that trial. And say, "God, I will reason, I will act, I will do everything in my power, but I will reason, I will act, but guide thou my reason, will, and activity to the right course in everything." And that's the best you can pray. And then the best you can do is just stay calm. No, it's always going to change. We were just talking about the fact that God doesn't have our love. It reminds me of another story. And that's of the Buddha. And shortly after he came, he meditated for a long time under the Bodhi tree. And or banyan tree, whatever the heck kind of tree it was. It really doesn't matter, does it? But what does matter is the state of consciousness that he achieved, that he was able to sit there and cast away one desire after the next, one desire after the next. And he did that by loving God. And so that love of God was bigger than all those small desires, and they all just faded away. And eventually he was able to merge into oneness with God. But now here's the point of this story. So after he came out of that state, that a prostitute came up to him and was making advances at him and was trying to tell him that she loved him, the Buddha. And the Buddha was letting this lady get close. And all of his disciples were panicked. "Oh my gosh, don't you know that this is a prostitute? She's trying to express this love to you." And she invited him to come to her home. And the Buddha said, "Not now, but later." His disciples, they were just panicking. "Oh my gosh, what is he doing? He's going to fall. Maybe he already has fallen. What's going on here?" And eventually the prostitute left, and everything went back to normal. And many, many years later, Buddha said, "My beloved is calling me, as I have to go visit her." And he took off to the house of this prostitute, and his disciples followed along in panic. And that prostitute, because she'd lived a wrong life, her body was just eaten up with sores all over her body, caused by venereal disease. No one would dare to go near her, that these sores, they were just smelling and rotting on her body. And she was near death. But the Buddha, he went right up to her, picked her up on his lap, stroked her head, and then he said, "I love you." And he healed her. And then she understood. Then she understood what true love was. Then all of his disciples understood what true love was. That ability to love everybody, even when they're really suffering, even when they're suffering so much that everyone's in fear and wants to go nowhere near those people. So you have to do that on the inside. You have to give everyone that love on the inside. On the outside, you do what's appropriate. Anyways, elsewhere in this western side of the passage, that it says that God is the light. The light shines, but the darkness comprehends it not. We can understand this passage in two ways. One, that God is all duality. And so, in that duality, and this applies especially to you, as you become a better human being, because you're meditating, because you're seeking God, the people will persecute you. That the darkness, and that's people with worldly minds, with darkened minds, they're not going to understand what you're doing. That they will push against you and try to tell you not to meditate, not to love God. The darkness that comprehends it not. But you have to stand up for what is right. I mean, you don't have to get into fist fights, but it's one of the first tests on the path. You stand up, sometimes even to your near and dear ones, and say, this is just what I'm going to have to do. Swami Kriyananda said that to his own earthly father. He said that he said to his earthly father that you gave me physical life, and that's one thing. But my Guru is giving me eternal freedom. He's giving me true life. And if you make me choose, I'll choose. His father backed off after that. Okay, so that's one way to understand the darkness comprehends it not. Another way to understand this passage is that when God manifests the creation, that there's a part of himself that stays aloof, that's never touched. And that's the true light. And that's the light that the darkness that is Maya can never understand, because it never even vibrated, it never even existed. You know, this is a very interesting thing. That as you become realized, as you start going back to God realization, you really begin to understand, as we were saying in the beginning of this talk, that you become all of creation, and that it's all here right now. There's a book, I believe his name's Ram Dass, and he wrote it. It's called Be Here Now. I've never read it. But one day I was meditating for hours, and I just thought, oh, it's all here, right now. And all I have to do is be here, now, with God. That's realization. And it's realizing that everything's right here, the good and the bad. That you're something beyond all of that. You're beyond the good and the bad. And the be here now also is showing you that you are omnipresent in space. You are omnipresent in time. You're all of it. I had an interesting conversation with a friend last night. Actually, it was 2 nights ago. But you know, we love to talk on and on about the yugas and how it's going to get better in the future, and maybe when we reincarnate we'll get to that higher yuga and it will be easier to achieve self-realization. But you know, all of the yugas truly, they're right here, right now. And you get to choose what level of consciousness. That means what yuga you will manifest right now. Another wonderful thing that's just so heart comforting in this be here now understanding as we become the creation is that it's so easy to think that, well, I don't have good karma, and maybe in a few incarnations when things are better outwardly, then I'll be able to devote more time to God, and then I'll be able to show my love properly in meditation, and then maybe I'll find Him. You'll never find Him with that attitude. And the be here now business is, it doesn't matter what your karma is. That God's for everybody right here, right now. And if you simply love Him, that's all you have to do, is love God. Your karma, it just doesn't even matter. And even if you have the worst of karma, like Milarepa, who was killing people in that incarnation with using mantras, that his guru, he loved his guru with all his heart. He served his guru with all his heart. And his guru gave him liberation. That's a wonderful book to read, by the way, The Life of Milarepa. It gives anyone hope. And one thing, while we're just on that topic, is that Milarepa, his guru was making him do all these very difficult tasks. And Milarepa didn't understand why, but his guru was having him do those tasks to burn off that karma in this lifetime. But Milarepa just got fed up with it. I mean, and his guru was just treating him like dirt, which, as we were saying, that's the guru's job in a way, is to just break your ego, help you break through all this karma. But, so at one point Milarepa's guru went away, and the guru's wife just took pity on Milarepa. And Milarepa said, please, can you just tell me the technique? It was probably of Kriya Yoga, but I don't know. And the wife was just thought, my gosh, my husband's been treating this poor disciple just so terrible. She said, yeah, I'll give you the technique. So then Milarepa, and it was through some trickery that she gave the technique, but we don't have to go into the whole book. Milarepa went off into a cave, and he already had tremendous powers of concentration, that he was able to kill people with mantras, with this tremendous power of concentration. So he was sure that with his power of concentration and with this technique that he'd be able to just achieve liberation. And he was, finally I got it. And he went off into this cave, I don't remember the time frame, a week, a month, or whatever, and he just did that technique and did that technique, and nothing happened. And he came back, and I forget the details, but he again had to throw himself at the guru's feet. And the reason it didn't work is he didn't have that grace of the guru. The guru is God. He didn't have that grace of God, so he was just doing it with his own egoic willpower. And you'll never get free on your own like that. It just doesn't work. That it's devotion plus Kriya Yoga. That's the spiritual mathematics that helps you achieve God realization. And so with his guru's blessings then, he went back into that cave and he achieved liberation in a short amount of time. Now, speaking of time, I'm running out of time, and we better get to the eastern side of looking at this. And so Krishna's just going on and on. I'm this, I'm that. I remember first reading this in the Gita, and I just thought, okay, Krishna, I get it. Yeah, you're everything. But let's look at this a little deeper, that you can always tune into this on a deeper level. And one of the things here is, I am self-offering in those who would expand their little lives into cosmic life. You read that and you say, this is a deep scripture. It really makes you scratch your head. That yes, we're trying, I've been saying again and again this talk, that all we can do is offer ourselves. God has everything, but he doesn't have our love. But here Krishna is saying, I'm that aspect of self-offering. And you think that, and you just think, my gosh, what can I, he's even that. And it makes you realize how deep of a thing love is. And that, intellectually, okay, we can say that God is, let's say, the Murti. God is the ego. And God is that act of offering. But it's more than that. And let's think about it just a slightly different way. That you begin to understand that God is consciousness. And that God is all of these thoughts that are here now. All thoughts are here right now. And that God, via our level of consciousness, via our level of energy, that we attract these thoughts, God is putting the thoughts in our mind. That you think that they're your thoughts, they're not. That you're receiving those from God. But you're doing that dance of receiving his grace, of cooperating with his grace, just like that swing set. And so, even that offering, you have to cooperate with it. That you have to try to offer yourself, but in the end it's him who's offering himself to himself. You don't even exist. But those are just words, and they'll drive you crazy if you try to think your way out of this trap. You can't do it. You just have to love him more and more deeply. And that love, it's not this outer, I love you, 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 I love you business. It's not that at all. It's in the quiet, in your deep meditation, in your soul, when your mind's so quiet. And it's almost, the Master somewhere has a poem, or Swami, or one of them, that with wordless yearning, and in the deepest level that means with thoughtless yearning, where you're praying so deeply it feels like your brain will just split in two, but you know that your heart wants absolutely nothing else, that nothing else will work. And if you pray with that deepest devotion, oh, God has to come. Speaking of childlike devotion, that when you were a child, you didn't think about, oh, are my parents going to feed me? You didn't worry about it at all. You were just happy, dancing with joy, and that's all you had to worry about, was just being joyful. And then as we get older, we begin to think, oh, I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. And in that we grow our ego, and it becomes so stressful, it becomes so painful, but it doesn't need to be. You just, even in this moment, right now, right here, right now, you can turn it back over to God and just say, I realize that you're the doer, and I will do this, because you can't run away from it. That in the Gita, Krishna counsels Nishkam Karma, and that means that you still do your duty, but it's not attached. You don't want it, you don't not want it. You just do it. And in that way, you realize you're not even doing it. You just sit back and you're watching this thing happen. I say, it's a little weird, but you just watch. And you just realize it happens anyways. And you just inwardly stay connected to God. And in that, there's so much joy. There's so much freedom. Life is so easy to live like that. Now, there's one more thing I want to point out in these last minutes. In the perceptive, I am there perception. It's one more of these things, and I'm kind of trying to do this on purpose right now, to just kind of bend your brain of what are you going to do with that? You think it's you who are perceiving, but you're perceiving through your five senses. And even that, when you turn off your five senses, that you learn to perceive with your soul nature. But even that, it's God who's perceiving through you. And at the end, we just have to throw up our hands and just say, God, I don't even get it. That this thing, it goes so deep, and I don't have to get it, I don't want to get it. It's that type of intellectual understanding, cast it to the side. Cast even that into the fire. Just give God your love. Give Him your heart. And it's the only thing that works. I simply have nothing else to say. It's so simple. Don't complicate it. Don't make it complicated. Just love Him. That's it. There's nothing else to say in this. It's been a wonderful evening together. Do this. Pray for devotion. It's not wrong. Pray for salvation. God in His masculine aspect will say, you already have it. That'll confuse your mind. You won't know what to do with that. You say, God, give me more devotion. You'll melt every single one of those sheaths that are keeping you in delusion, and you'll catch Him in the net.